Hi, I'm Jeff.
I'm Karen.
Nice to meet you, Karen. How's your day going?
I'm doing well. What about yourself?
It's awesome. Better now for being here.
I'm
I'm glad to see you. Thank you for taking care of us. You guys have this new caramelized garlic steak thing. How's that going? You guys are rolling that out nationally soon, right?
Yes.
How's
So it will be launching maybe in like 2 weeks or so.
Okay.
We have been testing it out at this location for some time now, maybe a month or so. But it has been going really well. We've been getting some feedback from our guests, and it's been creating like a really big conversation of like the grass fed, of like the grass finish, which is super amazing.
awesome? Well, I'm going to try it next time, I think. Could I get a miso glazed salmon bowl?
Beautiful choice.
Great. To go, please.
To go, you
Yeah.
got it.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you, Karen.
Yes, of course.
My name is Jonathan Neman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sweetgreen.
My name is Nicolas Jammet, and I'm the co-founder and chief concept officer of Sweetgreen.
My name's Nathaniel Ru, co-founder as well of Sweetgreen and CMO.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
I am super excited to be with you for a whole bunch of reasons, not least of which being you're the first entrepreneurs I've met with whose products are literally like part of my DNA, given how much Sweetgreen I've had in my life. And you guys have kind of a founder meet cute. And so I'd love to hear the story of how you guys came together as we start the conversation.
Sure. Thanks for having us. So our story starts, 20 years ago. We met as freshmen at Georgetown in college. And actually, one of the first people I met was John. We were next door neighbors in our freshman dorm room. And then John and Nate met in accounting class 101. And so very early on, we met at Georgetown. And over the years, really bonded around some of the similarities we had in our lives. We were all kids of immigrants, kids that had come to this country, parents that had come to this country and built businesses. They were all entrepreneurs. And so we had all grew up in this context of our parents building businesses, running it, kind of pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into something. And then we also had this other conversation happening in our life at Georgetown as students of not feeling good about the options that we had around us to eat. And so there was this daily problem. And so we said, let's solve it. Let's write a business plan. And at the time, Georgetown was not the most, I would say, encouraging of entrepreneurship. Everyone really you were geared towards becoming a banker, consultant, more institutional career paths.
And DC's not exactly the most entrepreneurial
foreign
town
service,
in America.
Yeah, all of that stuff. That was more of the culture of Georgetown. But the three of us loved the idea of starting something and solving a problem. And there was this one lone elective class with an adjunct professor, entrepreneurship. So we all took the class, separate semesters, and it really taught you how to build a business plan, how to think about creating something, reaching out for advice, creating a network of other entrepreneurs. And so we started writing the business plan.
And so each of you took the class, but at different times. Had you
Correct.
communicated with each other about the class? Had one of you taken it first and like, you guys have to do this? Or was this total happenstance that you'd each taken the class?
Not really. I think we all took the class, but the thing that actually bonded us even more was that actually all of our parents were entrepreneurs. We all came from that type of background where your parents were first generation immigrants. We saw them building their businesses, kind of growing up in their offices and working with their family members or their friends. And I think it was really the fact that we had that as a shared connection where when we were going to start this business, they almost gave us the permission to say yes in a way where we were getting a lot of no's other places. And just knowing that we could jump off the cliff and like do it as three young 21-year-olds and having the support of our parents because we watched them was really helpful too.
And so I can see why you'd come together given the shared family history and the foundation of this class. Oh, here are kind of the building blocks. Here's what we need to get started. But it's not obvious that you would launch a salad franchise. So how did that become the idea that got you guys going in this direction?
I think it really just started wanting to solve a problem in our own life. And we were all, I think, had a serial entrepreneurship bent all throughout our lives. We each had different businesses that we had started and different endeavors. And then I think when this idea came about, it started off like, wouldn't it be great if this existed just for us? And it just became this constant conversation. And we all had different paths and how we got there. For me, we had all studied abroad somewhere our junior year. I had studied in Australia and had just gotten back senior year from that experience. And one of the things that really stuck with me was the culture there of food and the lifestyle around being healthy. That was the cool scene. Like the cool kids surfed and skated and were healthy and went to these healthy cafes. And that was the cool thing to do. And it was such a contrast to how health food was viewed here in the US, especially at the time. healthy food was not cool. It was this idea of like, eat your vegetables, not, food that is delicious, and because it's sourced well, that's why it's so tasty, and part of like that cultural relevancy. And so I think coming back, we really saw this, first opportunity just for ourselves. Let's create a tiny little restaurant for ourselves, our friends. We just counted how many. I remember we were like, how many people do we have to serve in a day to break even? And we went and stood outside the other restaurants in the area. We went to the Subway, we went to the Chipotle, we went to the Buoy Mongers, all these places with a clicker. And we literally counted like, okay, like they got 300 people in a day. How many people do we need to break even? And it really just started very, very small. And I think the vision started to really expand as we stuck our toes in.
By the way, I grew up in the DC area, and Buoy Mongers is like, I had an emotional reaction to hearing Buoy Mongers. It's a great local in DC. So you did that, but like restaurants are notoriously difficult businesses, very thin margins, really difficult like supply issues, et cetera. So you're 21, you've got this immigrant background, you have this entrepreneur mindset, but what got you to that next point of being like, no, we actually can do this and we're going to go out and get enough money so we can launch this thing?
I would say we had so much conviction in the problem we were trying to solve. Like John said, we wanted to solve this for ourselves. We knew that we were the customer. We knew this could really work well in Georgetown, just that small community. The more we started learning and researching around the state of food, fast food, the whole industry, we realized this was a much bigger problem outside of just Georgetown, outside of even just DC. So it got us really excited about what this could be, what scale we could solve this problem at. But to start, this was for us and our community, and we knew it's what we wanted. We knew it would work. And so we wrote a business plan and just started asking people for advice and money.
And you knew it would work because you knew it would serve yourself, and you had enough of a community of people going, God, that would be incredible if we had that. Is that the foundation?
Yeah, I'd say we knew that there was enough demand in that one community that it would work. But I think what allowed us to do it was quite honestly naivete and stupidity. If we want to be honest, is we thought it was going to be easy. We thought it was like, how hard can this be? You're going to, it was the beginning of freshman year. We found a location. It was right across the street from our dorm. It was 500 square feet. Tiny. I mean, this thing is a tiny little thing. And I remember we looked at ourselves. We're like, okay, we'll have this open by April 1st. It was October. We're like, we'll raise the money. We'll write the business plan. We'll go buy the food. We'll put, we looked at these kitchens. It didn't seem that complicated. We're like, okay, we're going to go buy the kitchen equipment. You're going to put it in. We're going to prep the food, and we'll hire some people and call it a day.
And it was the middle of the recession.
Yeah, it was the middle of the recession. We're like, oh, well, we'll design a cool logo and like a brand, and we'll be off to the races. And I think, I've heard a lot of other entrepreneurs talk about this, that if they knew what they were actually getting into, they would have never done it. Mm-hmm. And I think we were very much in that place that we actually thought it was going to be super easy, and we were going to create it, and it was going to be, self-sustaining. I remember even when we opened the first one, at one point, we're like, we'll get to 3 and then it'll be self-sustaining. It'll just grow on its own. And I think you underestimate how many micro challenges you have to solve. And for a restaurant company, one of the things that I think is what's so hard about it, but also so great at scale, is that you have to master so many different things. It's really so many different businesses within one business in order to be great. You have to master supply chain. You have to master real estate, construction, design, customer experience, technology. Today, automation. You have to be great at leadership and people. There's so many things that you have to do. And I think for a long time, in the early days, we actually used to kind of complain about it. Like, wow, our business is so hard. And we had friends that had kind of easier businesses. They would just like launch some consumer products brand on Shopify, and it was kind of a lot easier. They didn't have to do so many things. But I think for us, we've fallen in love with the difficulty, because how hard it is what makes the moat and what makes it so valuable and powerful over time.
So take me back to 0 to 1. It's October of 2006, if I'm right.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's October 2006, and you've got the idea, and you've taken the entrepreneurship class, the components. What happens between October and when you actually launch?
Well, the first thing I did was I called my dad, and I pitched him this idea that I had with these 2 guys, and there's a long pause, and he goes, Nathan, that salad dressing better be damn good. And then hangs up the phone. And that was my first piece of advice I got on the business. But it was really an exercise of us really defining what the concept was. I would say like October 2006 until we opened, we were still in school. So we were still in class. We were still having kind of like our normal student lives and then also at the same time building this company. But one of the things that we picked up on early on was the food companies with the best storytelling and the best marketing at the time were the ones that were actually the most unhealthy. And
Say more. Like,
and you know, we were studying the industry, whether it was you know, these other brands, other fast food brands, other kind of soda brands. They created this lifestyle around what they were doing, and it was really exciting and energizing. And we just wanted to take that playbook and do it for healthy food. And so we spent a lot of time in the beginning, not just building what the restaurant would look like and the design and the supply chain, but also the type of brand that we wanted to build. And so we took a lot of cues from places outside of the food industry, whether that be music or culture and art, and trying to figure out how do you create not just a business that serves healthy food, but a bigger brand around it.
so the brand work was really critical in the early days. It wasn't
Totally.
it wasn't just the nuts and bolts of actually launching a restaurant. It was really, we're going to build something that stands for more.
And I think if you rewind back to 2006 and 2007 and you understand that the state of food culture and the conversation on food was just starting to really shift, things like Fast Food Nation, Super Size Me, Michael Pollan's book, all these things were starting to poke at the food system, and consumers were kind of starting to question their food a bit more and how it made them feel. And so we saw those early inklings and we said, you know, we think the consumer's going to shift and we think they should, and we want to create an answer to that. We want to create a place they can go and feel connected and good about their food and feel good after they eat it.
Was there a point before you launched that first location where you said this isn't going to work, this isn't going to happen?
Every day.
Yeah, and I remember the specific point, you know, where we thought originally that we could do it for $100,000. So we were like, $100,000 sounds like a lot of money, you know.
And it is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. We're like $100,000 April 1st. And so we wrote the business plan. We went, you remember it was Christmas break, and we all go to start to go to friends and family and all our old bosses to raise money. And I mean, we were asking anyone we'd ever met to donate as little as like $2,500. The average investment for us in that first round was about $5,000.
Wow.
We ended up getting about 50 investors, but we thought it was going to be $100,000 at first. And I remember we hired an architect. We hired a general contractor. They sent us the budget, and the first budget was like, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 or something. And we just looked at each other. We're like, oh God, this is not going to work. Like, we can't. This doesn't make sense. We thought it was going to be $100,000 and open April 1st, and all of a sudden it was going to open sometime that summer and cost many times more than that. And I think that was really the moment where it was, okay, this is for real. Like, we're going to do this. We have to have a lot of conviction in our belief in this and the personal commitment required in order to do it.
And as three hungry, literally and metaphorically, young entrepreneurs without a real track record, it's one thing to raise $100,000 from friends and family. It's a lot, and not everyone's in a position to do that. You guys were amazing, but now you need closer to $500,000. So how'd you get there?
Talking to a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of people, and I remember it's a painful process raising money, especially when you're unsuccessful in it, especially when you have to do it with a lot of people. But the value in it was sharpening your vision.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you have to sell someone and you have to sell, we ended up getting about 50 investors in that first round to raise $300,000. That means we have to talk to like 250 people. So when you have to have 250 conversations selling this vision and answering all these questions, it really, again, forces you to sharpen your plan. And I think that was really, really valuable, that we had to think about so many aspects of the business because people were giving us money and we had to be able to answer those things.
Yeah.
And so I think in a lot of ways, our parents didn't really want to invest for that reason. Our parents are like, we'll give you a couple $1,000s, but that's it. We want you, if you're going to do this, I want you to sell other people and do this the right way. And if it's going to be legit, it can't be a side project. It can't be a joke. This has to be a real thing.
And from those no's and from those questions that sharpened the vision, do you remember one in particular that stood out that really altered it and took you to the next level?
There were a lot of no's early on. And I think people, even when they saw the business plan and heard our vision, they said, that doesn't sound like a real restaurant. That doesn't sound like a full meal. That doesn't sound like what consumers want today. And we believed it's what consumers would want tomorrow. So, I mean, everyone from one of our finance professors telling us, don't go lose someone else's money, to I actually remember the landlord of our Georgetown, our first location, wouldn't even return our call. John called her 30 days in a row every single day. So she finally took a meeting just to stop the calls. And she ended up giving us a chance. She let us sign a lease. And in hindsight, we're like, wow, what crazy for her to sign a lease to 3 students with no background and, not much cash in the bank.
Amazing. So you launched the first location. What do you learn? What happens?
Anything that could have gone wrong went wrong that day. So we opened August 1st, 2007. And the day before we were opening, we were doing training. So we were having people come through and teaching them kind of the restaurants. And literally, I think it was a few days before that, we had the laptop with all of the recipes that we had stored on it sitting in our apartment, which was across the street, and it got stolen.
Oh, no.
Literally like the 2 days before we were opening or a day before we were opening. And this was before the cloud.
Yeah,
you're not
backing
any
into
stuff,
Google
right?
and finding it there, right?
And so we had to spend the like literally the last 24 hours before we opened trying to memorize all of these dressings and sit in this kitchen all day to kind of reformulate them, whether it's the recipes, the dressings, how we put things together. We used to have frozen yogurt, the frozen yogurt recipe. So all of these things, that's just one example of so many little things that went wrong. But I really believe it was, as when you open something, you launch something, it's a real testament to the commitment you have to the vision that you want to create. And even though we were super young at the time, we just had to push through. And it was kind of that gauntlet moment for us to kind of say, hey, we're going to do this. And even if it's not 100% perfect, showing up and just opening our doors day one was a really big milestone for us.
I remember specifically with the frozen, when we launched, we had this thing called Sweet Flow, which was our organic frozen yogurt, and it had a very specific recipe and the ratios. And we'd figured out everything else, but that was the last thing. And I just still have this like burning image in my mind, Nate standing over the machine, all night. We're like putting together different recipes. His hands are like deep in the machine. We have to clean it and keep doing it. And then I remember like right before we're opening, he like pulls it out. He's like, I think this is it. And like all tastes were like, okay, that's it. and that was the recipe.
So literally rolling up your sleeves and doing the work. I remember first hearing about you guys fairly early on, maybe just a few years after you opened your first location, and it was through music. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious. You talk about the brand work early on. Yeah. It's not obvious that an early stage. How do you describe it? Restaurant business, food business? Food business. Food business would go into music in as big a ways it felt like you did early. What led to that?
Music was really just something the three of us personally really enjoyed, and we got a lot of inspiration out of. The first music connection to Sweetgreen was just the first playlist that we made for that opening day, and we still have. And we play it sometimes, which is brings back a lot of memories. But the thing with music was we wanted to find ways that we could be a restaurant company, but also figure out a way to be more than just a restaurant company. And when we opened our second restaurant in DC in DuPont Circle, it was going to be our flagship location, 3 times the size, 3 times the cost. And we opened our doors in April of 2009 and we had no customers. Nobody came. And that was another moment when we looked at each other and we said, shit, this isn't going to work.
What went wrong?
We were on the wrong side of the block.
Huh.
If you looked across the street, it was one of the number 1 Starbucks in the city across the street. And we just had to figure out a way to get people from that side of the street to our side of the street. So it was a little bit of a real estate judo that we had to play. And so the solution that we had was really, how could we do marketing to get people from that side of the street to our side? And the only things that we knew how to do were to serve healthy food and play music and DJ. And so that's what we did. We went to Guitar Center, bought a $400 speaker. We put it outside. We faced it towards DuPont Circle in the park. And the 3 of us sat out there. We played music. We passed out menus. We passed out samples every Saturday and Sunday for a few months. And it just created this kind of community vibe and energy outside that got people to come to our side of the street. And it was our first lesson in trial and really getting people to try our product, because once they tried what we were doing, they became much loyal customers. And so there was a light bulb moment that went off when we did that kind of street DJ session, that there was a connection between food and music. And so the next year, we did a block party in the parking lot that we shared with the farmers market, which was really great. Free block party with local musicians. And then we really wanted to kind of throw a mini festival where you could serve healthy food and hear great music. And we got linked up to the guys that produce 930 Club, and they have a bunch of venues in DC. And they sent us, a few ideas. And I remember getting an email from them saying that, okay, if you could have anybody headline your salad festival, and that was the first time we heard the word festival, what would it be? And who would it be? And we had all these names of, at the time, of Daft Punk and The Strokes and Jay-Z and Arcade Fire. And I remember 2 weeks later, they came back to us and said, The Strokes are interested in playing your salad festival. And we had this decision to make at the time where we were a restaurant company at the time, probably with, I think, 8 or so locations. And we had to push our chips in and say, we're going to do this big 15,000 person festival. But in order for us to do this, we have to sell it out. Otherwise, we're going to lose a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. You're now in 2 of the hardest businesses in the world,
yes,
by the way.
Now we're in big music production and healthy food. And we looked at each other. I remember that moment. And we looked at each other and we said, it's almost like a no-brainer decision, because this is something that no other restaurant company would do. And this is something that us as founders were really passionate about. And we almost think about it as like at the time, a content platform for us and a community building platform for us. And so we did it. We booked The Strokes in 2011, sold the whole thing out. And that's what became the Sweet Life Festival, which we ran for 6 or 7 years in DC. So it's a long-winded way of saying music has been a core part of our DNA for a while. And even as we get to a bigger scale, always trying to figure out how to incorporate some of that into it.
Well, I'm also struck by the multiple already push all the chips in the middle of the table moments here, right? I mean, this isn't, I'm gonna place a bunch of small bets and string this out and try to get there and survive, which a lot of entrepreneurs, do, understandably, right? The first rule is don't run out of cash, make sure we stay in business. It feels like there was an element of like, if we're doing this, let's really do it. Yeah. Let's go, right? Let's not do the 930 Club, which by iconic venue, incredible venue, where no shade to 930 Club, but 15,000 people for your first music festival. That's no joke.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of risk in it. And I think to John's earlier point, if we knew then what we knew now, it probably wouldn't have been a decision we made. I mean, I'll never forget the cover of the Washington City paper the next day the headline was something like, what the hell are 3 salad kids doing hiring the Strokes? And it was a full-page article, and we're like, yeah, that's exactly why. And I think the DuPont Circle opening and failure at first, which led to the music connection, for us, the other unlock was realizing this power of building community around our brand. And what we were trying to create was fairly new. This category of healthy food was very new at the time, and some people didn't think it was a full category. And we looked at the power of community that existed in music, and we wanted to build that same sense of community, even from those mini block parties of Nate DJing outside DuPont Circle and us serving food. It became a weekend thing. It started with 20 people, 30 people, 40 people, ended with 25,000 people in a field at Meriwether Post Pavilion. But it was really the beginning of Sweetgreen starting to build this sense of community, and that we were building something different that wasn't just another fast food brand.
How have you carried that through? I mean, because you guys are now massive scale, and we'll get to that. But it feels like you've managed to carry that through. How is it, because it's so deeply rooted in the company, or is it come from something else?
I think when we first started, to your point, we started the first restaurant just for ourselves. Like, let's just open one. Hope it works. Then we said, okay, let's open a second one. Let's open a third one. And each one, we raised money individually for them. We had no corporate team. It was just the 3 of us, three guys, 3 restaurants. Imagine each of us effectively managing one of the restaurants. There's nothing built around scale from from a systems, a technology, a brand, really anything. It was just three restaurants that, we kind of thought about the brand a little bit. But it was that moment that we realized if we wanted to build something really big and we wanted to scale this, we studied other companies and what really defined those other companies from a scale perspective, especially consumer brands. It came down to a very clear mission, purpose, and values. And so we spent a lot of time, and I remember it was right when Simon Sinek had done that video about the golden circles, which you've probably seen and many probably have seen, where he talks about, companies really got to understand their why. And he talks a story about Apple doing a car and all of those things. And it really resonated with us at the time. And so at 3 Restaurants, we spent a lot of time at that moment going deep and documenting what is our purpose, what is our why, what's the mission of the company, and what are going to be the values that we make decisions by over a long period of time. Where are there going to be those bumpers for us as we get bigger, especially as we know that a restaurant business is much more a people business than a food business. It's really the power of your teams in the restaurant. Your head coach, you were in our restaurants today, you could feel that. The food is in some ways the easy part. The people is where the magic comes from. And we realized that in order to lead a large group of people, culture was the most important thing. And having a defined culture all came down to this like architecture of what's the vision for the company and what are those values. So it was that exercise, as I look back after 3 Restaurants, that then made Sweet Life an easy decision to do, because we had the architecture. We knew what the vision for the company was and where we wanted to take it and how all of those things then fit in.
The values, I was at the La Brea location in Los Angeles, Mid-City, LA today. The values are prominently displayed.
In every restaurant.
Are they the same values from back in the early days, or have they evolved over
Wording
time?
has tweaked, but it's outside of that. It's almost exactly the same. We've tweaked some of the wordings, and then underneath it for our teams, we have like kind of more depth of how they show up in life. But for the most part, they're exactly.
It was
the
a
same.
process to get there, though. I remember when we started, we had 3 core values, and then we went on this journey again where we made 20, but then we realized we couldn't memorize all 20. And then we said to ourselves, what are the things that we say every single day when we make a decision? And what you saw on the board today are pretty much those things that we just say all the time.
What are those things?
Well, first one is called win-win-win, which is trying to find solutions where the company wins, the community wins, and then our team members also win. We have one called Add the Sweet Touch, which is kind of our hospitality value, where we're trying to go above and beyond to just make somebody's day.
Got that from Karen and Ben today.
Yeah, Karen and Ben, exactly.
Yeah.
Think sustainably was huge from and that was a little bit of a double entendre, both, think sustainability around the food we serve and the operation that we have, but also thinking about business decisions in a really sustainable, long-term sustainable way. Wanted to make decisions that last longer than we did.
We have one called Build for Tomorrow, which is all about innovation and seeing around corners. And as much as music has been part of our DNA, innovation has been a big piece of it too.
And so most companies have values they've written down. Some of them put them up on a wall. Some of them even talk about them in like a new hire orientation or in a monthly team meeting or something. Very few companies feel like they actually live their values and their team members live their values. So what have you all done to sustain that as you've grown to the scale that you're at now?
So a big thing that we do to kind of have a through line of the culture from our restaurants to our support center is every day in our restaurants, we have something called a Sweet Talk. A Sweet Talk is almost like a pre-shift inspiration moment where for 10 to 15 minutes, our head coach, we call them head coaches, our general managers in the restaurants kind of get together. And it's less about the day-to-day technical things that we need to do. And it's more about recognition of people living the values, whether it was the day before, the week before, and using that moment as kind of less, call it like checking a box, but more reinforcing the culture. And so if you walk into a restaurant, probably around 10:30 in the morning, you'll see a Sweet Talk happening, and it's a really powerful moment for us.
And as you all have scaled the company, I have to imagine there have been moments where there have been opportunities that have looked really good to a finance person that have been counter to your values, to the company's values. Is there an anecdote from there, a story from there that you can remember where you've had to say, we're not going to do that even though it may be better financially, it's not consistent with who we are?
Yeah, I'll give you one very early one that's continued to come up, but came up very early. And when we started the business and we started crafting the vision after that 3 restaurants of what type of company we wanted to be. Part of it was something that could last the test of time. And we knew that retail and restaurants, there's a lot of change that happens. And we've seen that over the past 17 years. But so much change can happen. And we kind of looked at, one example of a company that we looked at that was, everyone kind of looks up to Apple. And one of the things around that we loved was the fact that they owned everything kind of from an end to end. The classic example, they own the hardware and the software. In restaurants, what most people don't truly grasp is most chain restaurants in the United States are franchise restaurants. So the brand owns like the IP, but ultimately it's other groups that are running those restaurants. Very early on, we said we don't want to be a franchise restaurant because if we do, we may lose control of the quality of what we do, or if things change, we're going to have to, negotiate with our franchisees to make those changes. All to say, we'd rather go a little bit slower and own the end-to-end experience to ensure that quality and stand the test of time versus opening the floodgates and selling franchises.
I have to imagine your investors and advisors were not thrilled about this decision.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you, today maybe looks like a good decision, but if you go back when we had 3 restaurants, that we got an offer for a very, we always got franchise requests from day one, one-off franchise requests, probably 1,000 of them. But at one point we got an offer from like a very legitimate large company that wanted to license the brand and put it in over 100 places. It was a very lucrative deal. It was so attractive. And I remember we thought really hard about it because what it solved for wasn't just getting the brand everywhere. And at some point when you're in that business, you think that everything is a race. You're like, you're looking at your competition and you're like, oh my God, they're franchising, so they're going faster than us. They're going to beat us. It's first to market. And the second piece is franchising is for many a financing strategy. You get paid up front and then you just get this royalty stream, so you don't have to raise money. And if you go back, this is 2008, 2009, middle of the financial crisis. We have no capital. And it was very, very appealing to kind of take that offer. But we, thought long and hard and thought about that value of thinking sustainably. And we wanted a business that wasn't just going to, have this short-term pop and not be around for a long time, but something that could truly stand the test of time. And we said no, and we've continued to say no to those.
So given that, and given starting from one location in Georgetown to a second in DuPont Circle, and I want to come back to the real estate in a moment. How did you start the journey of scaling nationally? What got you there if it wasn't franchising?
Yeah, I think the foundation of the values was really helpful because it allowed us to make the proper decisions. Then as we started to build out our team, make sure that we were hiring people that also lived by those values and made decisions in that lens. But, it started very simply after we had the first 3 that were actually kind of doing well. And then we got really excited about expansion. We kind of went on tour and visited all these cities around the country and said, we could put one of these in every city. And we actually got very excited at one point and almost signed a bunch of leases. And then we kind of stood back and said, hold on, we need to really perfect the model. Think about how this needs to evolve from our menu to our supply chain. I mean, so much of how we operated those first 3 restaurants was very mom and pop. It was like farmer coming in the back door. And so we said, how do we put the right systems in place around the things that really make us special, right? So we had the values and we were trying to really build out community and brand that we've talked about. And then really thinking about how we build a supply chain that is different and can prioritize this food ethos we were creating around serving a different type of product. And so we really started to build, I guess, V1 of scalable supply chain according to the ethos that we wanted to serve. And at that point, we decided, let's go deeper in this DC, Virginia, Maryland region. Let's really build a brand, master this model a bit more before we start spreading ourselves to all these different cities. And in hindsight, probably one of the best decisions we ever made.
And in part, I assume because you could work with the same suppliers, right? So you had some quality control.
Same suppliers, understand what it looks like from going from 1 to 3 to 10 in a region and understand what that system is. And also, you can wrap your arms around one region. You can get to every restaurant. You can hire. You can be really thoughtful. Having restaurants around the country really early is just a whole different set of challenges.
And was there an element also of, again, I grew up in Maryland. I lived in D.C. for nearly 10 years as an adult. It is not the most forward-leaning city in America. One would imagine if you were starting from scratch with a health-forward company, you might be in California, you might be in Miami, you might be in Austin. You could be in any number of cities. So was there an element of, if it works here, we can do this anywhere in the country?
I think we wanted to build enough confidence in the model and the brand before we went to some of these larger cities. And, building the brand over the first couple of years, and just, we got to around 20 restaurants in DC, Virginia, Maryland. We'd gone to Philly, so a little further, really understanding what a second city feels like. And we made a bunch of mistakes on how you hire, how you operate remotely, how you build a second supply chain, how do you build a brand from scratch in a new city, all these micro learnings that really allowed us to, once we were ready to go to New York, Boston, California, go with some set of a playbook, some sort of belief of how we introduce Sweetgreen the right way in a new city.
So take us through the jump. How do you leap from the DMV to other areas nationally?
Yeah, I feel like there's in our 17 years of doing this, there's been different founding moments across the way, and the beginning was one, like we talked about, and then 2012, 2013, so about, call it 6-7 years later, was another one, and that was the moment that we made the decision to go outside of just DC and Philadelphia and open restaurants in New York and Boston, actually. And we were really nervous because we looked at the rents, we looked at the competition. New York is just a whole different type of operation than what we were used to. And so we decided to, again, push our chips in and take a bet on New York and Boston. And part of that process, it's almost like raising money in the beginning. We wanted to almost start from a blank canvas and say, if we were redesigning this concept for the future and thinking about future-proofing Sweetgreen for New York and then beyond, what would we do differently? So what we did is we almost kind of took the existing model, those 20 restaurants that Nick said, and we hired a brand new architect. We hired a digital agency to help us build a mobile app that was kind of first of its kind. And we really thought about what our kind of community vibe and feeling would be in these new restaurants. And so we spent almost a year and a half in 2012 and 2013 building a new concept. Even though it was the same Sweetgreen, everything on the inside was new. And when we launched New York and Boston and call it, I think, the summer of 2013, it felt like a different business, and it felt different than the competition. And it also had a digital component to it, which was really important. Mobile order and pickup, which was new for Sweetgreen. And I think that jump for us really helped us kind of build a new platform to kind of jump off again.
When companies hit that second founding, that second almost inflection point, often there are members of the team who've helped get from the first stage to the second stage who are not the right people to get from that point to the next. Is that what happened with you all as well?
I think that's one of the hardest things about building a startup is at each of these inflection points as you're building scale, you almost have to start over on everything. All of your systems, all of your tools, all of your, everything that you do, including a lot of your team, may not, what was right to get you from 0 to 1 may not be right from 1 to 2. I think we were very lucky that we had a lot of people that actually were able to scale with us. And then we had some that weren't, that were really suited for that 0 to 1 stage. And, many have gone on to do amazing things. We have like an amazing alumni network. But I think that's one of the hardest things is understanding how the team scales as the business scales. Because when you start, you have a small team and everyone's a generalist. You need just generalists that do everything. And as you get bigger, you need more specialists. And that generalist may not have the experience of a specialist, but there's such value in having some people along for the ride the whole way, because they're those culture carriers. And so we're really lucky that even today, many people that have been with us, 10 plus years. One of our first hire, a guy named Tim Noonan was joined us, literally the first person that joined us, still today, and runs our development organization. So there's some people that continue on with us, and many people that find another path.
There's also not just the shift generalist to specialist, but for people who are there in the early days, good on Tim for being able to ride it all the way through and be with you guys. There's a sense of, gosh, I used to know everything happening at the company.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And now I'm being put. I mean, companies literally create divisions. I mean, can you imagine a worse word? So how did you navigate that with the people who did stay with you? How did you keep a sense of cohesion?
I think one of the things that we did, and I remember there was a specific we have a retreat that we do, kind of, we do it every few years called our Impact Retreat.
What do you serve? Yeah.
And in it was I think it was 2018 Impact Retreat, and the business was changing a lot, and the company was changing a lot because we had hit another inflection point.
Where was the 2018 retreat?
It was in Palm Springs, and I remember the talk I gave, kind of the opening talk. I came and I remember I put up a picture of David Bowie, and I said David Bowie's my favorite artist, which is true. And the reason I love him so much was not only because he's so talented, he was so talented and able to do it every decade a different way. And his ability to change and adapt. And I kind of brought that to a company that great companies have to change, and we have to embrace that change. The world changes. That means the business is going to have to change, but also our roles change, and us knowing everyone changes and knowing everything changes. And instead of viewing change as a bad thing, if we're not changing, it means we're not growing. It means we're dying. And so just bringing that philosophy into the business, that change is good.
Do you want to do a little Bowie for us?
No. Well, I love music, but I have zero talent.
Okay, all right. We'll call on Nate for that later. We had John Mackey on Masters of Scale recently, and he was talking about the importance of the real estate choices that Whole Foods made and being very deliberate. What did you learn from opening DuPont just on the wrong side of the street, right? Almost the perfect location at that time in DC. Otherwise, that you've carried through, and how has your real estate strategy influenced what you're doing?
I think with real estate, what we've learned is that every community is different. So what's great in one city may not be great in another city. And I'll give you an example. We're here in Los Angeles. We spent most of the beginning part of our career opening urban East Coast. So in urban East Coast, New York, DC, a lot of these places, it's location, location, location. You want to be on the pin with the most traffic, right? Where are the most bodies coming from, and how do you get closest to that pin? So we come to LA, and we see a location right on 4th Street in Santa Monica. It's so busy there. Open that location and realize it's actually so busy that nobody likes to go there. It's so busy that you can't get in, and there's no parking. And so people know that it's there, but think that it's not an accessible place. So in LA, it's all about accessibility. It's all about visibility. It's actually okay to be 3 blocks off the pin and have great parking and great visibility. And as you go further into the suburbs, it changes even more. Really, why you see those big pylon signs and those drive-throughs and those lights to turn in and out, that becomes more important than the exact pin. So I think really understanding the sequencing of, as you open different restaurants, the sequence matters a lot. The order in which you open. The example there is in New York, very intentionally wanted to tell a story with our real estate. So the best place probably to open in New York would have been Midtown Manhattan. Today, our highest volume locations are in Midtown. Very intentionally did not go to Midtown because we wanted to build a lifestyle brand and be part of the community. So we went to the Nomad Hotel. We went to Nolita. We went to Williamsburg. We went to these little communities to build a brand that then gave us license to be everywhere. So I think the two big lessons around real estate is sequencing and storytelling through the real estate, but also understanding that each city and each community is different, and having people that are local that truly understand it is worth so much. And that's, I think, in the early days, what made us some of the successful things that we did is because, the reason we were able to open on M Street where we did in Georgetown is we lived across the street. Nobody wanted that site, but we knew it was perfectly equidistant from the main, traffic on M Street and the university. Anyone else would have thought it was terrible real estate, but we were so close to it. So the closer you can get to your customer and to that local community, and remembering that restaurant, retail, it's a local game. So we talk about scale nationally, but it really is our business is 230 individual restaurants. And that's what makes the business.
Did any of that inform the decision to move to LA in 2016? Because you guys relocated to LA, right, in 2016, if my memory's right. We
did, and I think for us that was, as we looked at the trajectory and arc of the business, we were at this point where we had built a good sized team. We'd opened a couple restaurants, and we were thinking about this journey to being this national brand we wanted to create. We wanted to win this category, be a national brand. And we looked at California, and we knew it was going to be one of our biggest, if not our biggest market, and the importance of winning California. And also, as we were building our team and really thinking about that next level of leadership we wanted to hire into the team, just thinking about ease of where you could hire people. And DC versus a place like LA, there is a difference. And so we decided, you make that move really once and let's do it thoughtfully. And we had about 35, 40 people on the team at the time, and they all moved with us.
Wow.
And it was quite a journey. And, that was almost 8 years ago now.
Wow. So I didn't realize they'd all moved with you. How did you, were people just, I'm all in, I'll do anything? People have lives. You've got family, you've got friends. How did that happen?
At the time, the average age of our team, I would say, was 26 and single and unattached. And, we were really thoughtful about how we introduced the move, sharing the why behind the move and how it fed into the mission and allowing us to become this national brand and really just accelerate that mission. And then we created a really great relocation, process and experience around taking people out there for a trip, saying, let's go on this journey together, come try it. Let's go build the future of food out in California. And we're really grateful to DC. Our roots are there. It's where Sweetgreen is born. But, we really thought moving the headquarters to California would allow us to really take that next step in being a national brand.
Win, win, win.
Yeah.
Goes back to values. Yeah. So you guys are now a public company. Tell me about the decision to go public.
I think going back to our original vision and mission of the brand for what we wanted to do with the company, we wanted to make a real impact on the food system and on the communities of people. And our mission, which I guess we haven't said, is building healthier communities by connecting people to real food. And I think where that becomes very powerful is when you do that at scale. That's when we can be a real force on how food is grown and the health of our communities, as well as the incredible opportunities we can create for our team members and as they grow in their careers. And in order to do that, we're very capital intensive. We're a very capital intensive business. We own all of our restaurants. That means we're building each one of these restaurants, as well as a lot of infrastructure to support what we do, whether it be the supply chain, the technology, the brand, et cetera. And so, we always do that at one point. We kind of had a vision that at one point we would do it, and I think we got to a point in the business where the markets were in a place, the company was in a place, and we had an opportunity to raise a lot of money to kind of fuel that next chapter for us. And our goal, we don't see, it's funny that some people view an IPO as an exit. We don't view it as an exit at all. It's a financing. It's a way to bring capital onto the balance sheet, create a more public platform and more exposure, and continue on this mission. So it's just another, day one type of experience for us.
It is, and all of a sudden, your financials are public.
Yeah.
Right? There are a lot of details about the company that weren't public before that are now. And no matter how insane it is, you're being held to quarter numbers, right? And the markets don't usually give companies the luxury of saying, no. Like, don't quarter to quarter, it's going to be whatever, but on a 2-3 year horizon, here's where we're going and judge us on that. So how did you get your heads around that, and how have you managed that part of the challenge?
I think we thought a lot about it going into it, and spoke to our team a lot about it, about the fact that this really shouldn't make how we make decisions, especially the important ones. There does create a public scoreboard. There is some short-term accountability, and in many ways that helps you operate better, right? We all kind of see our performance, and it puts everybody on the same page, and we have a liquid currency around that. But we're very intentional that having that quarterly earnings cycle not change the investments we make over the long term. And I think we've been very fortunate in how we've set that company up, the shareholders that we've chosen and brought on that are clear with that vision that we have. And of course, we have to perform every quarter in order to continue to build that confidence and trust. But we're very intentional not to allow that short-term measurement to change the important decisions.
I would say in a way it's also created a bit of a constructive pressure on keeping us focused as we try to scale and execute. With 3 founders, there's a million ideas we want to go pursue, and we probably have a history of trying to do too much at once. Being a public company, you have that expectation of having to execute on what you've promised to the street. So it actually creates a bit of this constructive pressure for us to actually try to stay very focused on the business plan at hand.
I'm curious. It's so fascinating just watching the dynamics among you guys and how seamlessly you move back and forth between who's answering questions and how you play off of each other. How did you define your roles at the beginning, and how has that changed over time to now?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we did every single job. So whether it was cashier, putting lettuce in a bowl, chopping tomatoes, cutting onions, we did it all. And like John said, when we had 3 restaurants, we kind of each took one. And so we also ran a restaurant or two for a while. And I think it was a really important, we always say the answers lie inside the restaurants, because it was a really important moment for us to really understand, one, how to operate one of these things, and two, understand all the flaws and the imperfections that kind of make it better. And then, but in the beginning, we were all kind of co-founder, co-CEOs of the business. We each did have our own, I would call it, passion or natural sphere of influence. So John was in charge of really leading a lot of like the financing conversations, a lot of the investor relations, even construction at one time, store development and real estate. Nick was always in the center of all the food conversations we were having, talking to farmers, thinking about how to build a supply chain a little bit differently. And then my world was always around, how do we tell our story? And how do we have fun in terms of building community? And that's kind of in a way stayed somewhat the same. You know, now John's the CEO and Nick is still very deep in our supply chain and food, and I'm still doing a lot of the marketing work. But our wives always joke that we prepared each other for marriage because we spend so much time together. You know, I lived with John for 8 years. Nick lived across the street.
Purchased homes together.
Yeah,
wow.
we had a bank accounts
You were
together.
all in. We had bank accounts together.
And it's almost more of the marriage than anything. And one of the questions we get asked a lot is like, we're so impressed with the business and how big you guys have gotten, but we're even more impressed with the fact that you guys haven't killed each other yet. And that you guys are still working together and still sit in the same office and still sometimes go on vacation together and all of these kind of things that normally doesn't happen after 17, 18 years. But I think what makes us keep doing it is just that vision that we kind of laid out in the beginning. We think Sweetgreen, whether it has us or not, can be a 100-year business. And that's what we're trying to do. And none of us, especially in the beginning, had any technical ability. So it's not like one of us was a technical co-founder or had some type of job before. We all kind of grew up in this business together. And so we never had a conversation on, well, I did this before and I know it's right. And so we've always tried to just leave the ego out of it and do what's best for the business. And as powerful as that has become, it's been really like such an important role of how we operate the business separately, but then how do we come together as founders too?
Yeah. You know, I look at solo founders and I think, man, that is hard to do that solo. And I have a lot of respect for them because whether it's the highest of highs or the lowest of lows, to have folks next to you going through that with you that understand what it feels like is really powerful. I'd say as our company has grown and we've gone through these different chapters, so much of our day-to-day is really thinking about just the team. I mean, we have built this incredible, set of leaders and executives and just throughout the whole company. And so much of it is like building a team, right? It's like building a sports team. It's like the same principle. And then just the importance of, Nate mentioned this, but staying connected to our actual restaurants. Our business is not in what we call the support center. Mm-hmm. It is in the restaurants with our team members, the head coaches, this critical role, the, mini entrepreneurs that run our restaurants, run these businesses. So for us, the bigger we get, the more important it gets for us and everyone on our, in our team to spend time in our restaurants because that's the business.
I feel like the Sweetgreen app was one of, if not the first restaurant apps that I had on my phone. You mentioned that as a key part of the growth. I'm curious how you decided to make that investment, how it evolved, and particularly what happened for you as COVID hit and the world shut down that you already had that in place.
Yeah. So, we opened our first restaurant August 1st, 2007. The iPhone had not been released yet. So the iPhone comes out just a couple months later. It's just like crazy to think how much the world has changed.
I mean, I was working at MySpace at the time.
Yeah.
That's how much the world has changed.
How much the world has changed since that moment. And in many ways, I think we were very lucky because we were 22 years old, digitally native in many ways. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, this revolutionary product comes out. And, if you fast forward, we have a few restaurants that open at the time. Amazon, the world is moving towards e-commerce. And I remember the saying was, well, you guys are luckier in food because that's the one thing Amazon's never going to do. It's funny to think about that today as they own Whole Foods and kind of do a lot more. But at the time, it was viewed that no one's going to buy food online. It was almost thought as crazy. But for us, we had a huge problem in our business, which was really an opportunity, which was we had these huge lines once we got going, we would have huge lines. We were known for these massive lines that would wrap around the block. And because at the time most of our business was more so salads, it was very lunch driven. So you had a very short window to make all of your money. So it was just how fast you could go. And so the simple idea was like, why can't you just order on your phone and have a second line? Like, well, it's kind of like it just. Now it seems so obvious, but at the time it was very simple. Like be able to order online to skip the line, and that was the original insight. And I think what made us successful in doing it was that we were early and were able to take a first principles approach. So we were able to think about the actual box itself. How did we need to design a restaurant that would enable a digital experience and not ruin the in-store customer experience? So very early on, we started building restaurants that effectively had a ghost kitchen in them. It would have a secondary digital make line for all of the online orders, and then you had our in-store traffic. Then you think about these shelves that we have. If you've been to our restaurants, you see we have these pickup shelves that have now become very commonplace. The funny story about that is, at first, probably like most companies, the online orders would be held behind the counter. You'd have to walk up to our team member and be like, "Hey, my name is this," and they'd go behind and grab the order. No one thought you could just leave food out there. We didn't think you could either. Well, one of our restaurants was really small, didn't have much space behind, and had a lot of online orders. So they just started stacking the bowls. They just took
no call to headquarters, just like, hey, this is what we got to do to make it work.
They just put a metro shelf out there and just started stacking orders, and customers just started taking them. And we realized they actually preferred it. Like, it was great. It was like this pure frictionless pickup experience. And so then we're like, okay, let's build this into the restaurant. And it's just funny to see today that the whole industry now has these pickup shelves, and we all trust our customers to pick up their order and not take someone else's.
Yeah, it's ubiquitous. It's super customer friendly, and whatever handful of customers don't end up getting their orders, I mean, it must be covered several times over just by, okay, great, we can remake that, no problem.
But we've seen technology, we've always said, Sweetgreen is a food company first. What's most important that we do is the food that we serve and the experience that we provide. We do have this philosophy around art and science, and how do we really beautifully balance art and science in our business? And technology is where a lot of the science comes in. We see technology as an enabler in order to improve that customer experience. And we use technology in so many parts of our business, whether it be our online ordering or our delivery channels. Our digital makes up about 60% of our business happens digitally.
Wow.
We also use a lot of technology in how we enable our operations, whether it be some of the tools we use in the back of house, some of the forecasting around how we order, how we schedule labor, how we prep our food. And more recently, we've invested in automation, which we think is another accelerant to improving the customer experience.
When you say automation, do you mean robotics?
Correct. Yeah, we don't call it robotics because it's not robotic arms. It's automation. But about 3 years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, we saw a huge opportunity around automation. We saw this, it really started with our overall vision for food. And when we think about most restaurant companies, as they get bigger, they start to have to make certain concessions in order to scale. What most companies do is they take those concessions in the prep. So when you think about a Sweetgreen, we do a few things. We do prep in the restaurant. We buy great food. We prep it. We then assemble it, and then we serve it. Within that process, what we realize is most restaurants, as they get bigger, they begin to outsource the prep. They take the prep and they put it in a commissary. The food ends up showing up in a bag. The chicken becomes pre-cooked. All of those sorts of things in order to manage consistency and create better unit economics. That's something we didn't want to do. We saw the valuable parts about what we do being the hospitality and the prep and the sourcing. And the assembly, in many ways, is actually where a lot of the challenges are. It can be, you can get orders wrong. You can be off on time. And we're like, this is a perfect opportunity for automation to actually improve the customer experience, improve the team member experience, and improve our unit economics. So like a perfect win-win-win that over time can actually protect our ethos, because we're going to find efficiencies not in sacrificing the quality of the food, but using technology to innovate the experience.
Is AI in the same lane for you? Are you finding efficiencies through AI that improve the customer experience?
We have been for a while. There's a lot we do on the marketing side, CRM. We're doing a lot today using AI for for labor deployment and ordering. We have been playing with a lot around order recommendations, kind of like personalized menus and those sorts of things. So it's a very exciting time for us to take advantage of some of these different tools. But the automation is really the big platform shift that we've led. We have 2 restaurants that are automated today. It's called the Infinite Kitchen is the technology, and we acquired a company to help us enable this. And we think that, over the next 20 years, automation is that next platform shift, similar to the digital transformation we've seen over the past 15.
And beyond the efficiencies and maybe the recommendations, you guys, I was at the Sweetgreen earlier today and saw that a product that's about to roll out nationally. You've got a caramelized garlic steak dish that's coming out. Is that instinct? Is that data analysis? Is that AI? How do you decide when new products are going to actually go to market nationally?
Yeah, I think it starts again with the vision. This larger vision we have of really redefining fast food and connecting people to healthy food. We know that always meant eventually to serve more people in different parts of the country, we'd have to broaden what we serve and really reach more customers. And so our menu has really broadened quite nicely over the last few years. And where salads used to be the only and majority category, today it's one of our smaller categories. And we still, believe in investing heavily in the supply chain, the ingredients that go into all of our menu. But last year we launched protein plates, and now we're excited to, be launching steak at some point. We're testing it in a few restaurants, but really just broadening our offering to be heartier and just reach more customers, and really broaden who can eat Sweetgreen and the impact we can have.
And the idea of automation, does that replace workers? Does that eliminate workers? Is that part of the vision for as how you expand?
So we're mostly putting them in new restaurants. We don't plan on eliminating any workers as part of the rollout. So it's going mostly in new restaurants, and in any retrofits that we have, we will keep those jobs for our team members. The way we see it is it's actually elevating the role of our team members. It's creating better jobs for them, not only because some of the menial tasks are being removed, but they're also learning about a new technology and getting to focus on what really the core of the restaurant is, which is around service and hospitality, and also coaching and development. There's a reason we call our general managers head coaches. The magic of the restaurant, back to the people, it's all about that head coach and that team. And one of the key critical things for success for restaurants, including us, is in growing people from within. How can we grow that internal pipeline of future leaders? And the automation in many ways helps us do that, because now it's a little bit easier to run. You can run a really high volume location without having to worry out one part of it, and the team members get to focus on the parts that they enjoy, be it the cooking of the food and the culinary aspect, or the hospitality or the coaching. And so, it's interesting is when we announced it, we were a little bit nervous how our team's going to feel. But the response has been like, can I have one first? Like people are lining up, and the happiness we're seeing in the stores that have it are much higher. We're seeing much less turnover in the restaurants that feature the Infinite Kitchen. And so it's still very early, but we're very excited about the opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think this speaks to the opportunity that both automation and AI offer us, right? I mean, there are all sorts of dystopian views of it, but done right, I mean, eliminating menial, mindless tasks that take away from a customer experience, or from a team member experience, that therefore probably takes away from a customer experience. It's an exciting place to be.
Yeah.
A few more questions before we wrap. I'm super curious because every business leader I speak with is struggling with this question right now as we look at what's happening in the world and in our country, whether it's Ukraine, Israel and Gaza, China, Taiwan, or what's happening domestically. I have to imagine, given the community that you've built and the sense of community among your team members as well, that there's a lot of pressure to speak out on certain issues, political, social issues, and also there's risk in that. How do you all decide when you're going to say something, and then how to say it and where to say it?
So, for a long time, like most companies, we spoke up during a lot of crises. And then it was a few years ago that we realized that it was a huge distraction. It was a huge distraction, a huge risk to us and our team. So about 3 years ago, we kind of went in front, we talked to the team, and we said, we're a mission first company. And we all have our beliefs, political beliefs, social beliefs, etc. And they're all important. You're all welcome to have those. But at Sweetgreen, we're only focused on Sweetgreen. So please leave those opinions at the door, and do not expect Sweetgreen to speak about any of those issues. We are going to focus on if it's an issue related to food, health, sustainability, or our people directly. We will do something. We may comment internally about certain issues, but as a brand, we do not believe it's appropriate to make comments on any of those sorts of issues. And I think it's been one of the best decisions in making sure that people come to Sweetgreen not for some social or activist agenda outside of the core mission of what we do.
I think what I struggle with on that is, and I'm not arguing the decision because you all know your business and what's best for you all is, if you look historically, globally, it's business leaders who ultimately are the ones who propel a lot of change, whether that's the civil rights movement in the U.S. or apartheid in South Africa. Just to go one level deeper on,
and that's where it's challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, this is very, very challenging. I do have strong beliefs on some of these issues, and I think there's this delicate balance between what the company says and what we may say personally on our own platforms. And what's been a tough learning is it's sometimes hard to separate that. I have my views that I do want to use my platform for, sharing some of those things, but also have to be very careful that anything I say does represent the brand. So on some of those issues, I have spoken out. Some positively, some with some backlash. And so careful about what we say, but I do agree with you on some issues. I think it's important for leaders to speak up on those things, but I think it's inappropriate for the brand itself to speak up.
Yeah, no matter how hard it is for customers or team members to distinguish sometimes, or the market to distinguish sometimes. And I do appreciate also having a framework of, we're a company that is about health and sustainability. And so on those issues, not only do we have permission, we have an obligation to speak out. And I think that's a helpful framework for a lot of folks who are trying to figure that
I
out.
think the point too is our current mission of fixing the food system and evolving it is such a big one. There's so much to talk about there that we show up every day to do, our team members do. And so for us, really focusing on those issues is also where we can have a huge impact. And there are so many problems and so many parts of the food system that we're excited to just be diving into and evolving and being a change agent. That is where we have a lot of power to impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, and our approach is, I would, on the mission-oriented things is, we're kind of on this journey with everybody. We don't pretend to have all the answers when it comes to how we're going to fix the future of food or how we're going to think about healthy food at scale. And I think that our value proposition as a company and as a brand has always been, we always almost personify it as like the ultimate tour guide. You probably have that friend in a certain city that will just take you out and take you to the cool restaurant, introduce you to the local artist, take you to the right museum, and curate your experience for you. And when it comes to Sweetgreen, that's the kind of brand and feeling that we want you to have when you come interact with Sweetgreen. You see us on social media, you think about us as a community of folks, and we always kind of use that persona as we're making decisions, whether it's on our food, whether it's deciding whether to speak out or not, or it's even thinking about just how we're operating the business day to day.
One component of what I hope is your 100-year journey that happens sooner than later. I travel a lot for work. I go through airports. Boy, is it difficult to find healthy food as I go. If I land in a city, it's a pretty good bet there's a Sweetgreen there, and I'm good. How do we get you guys into airports around this country?
It's been part of our vision from the very beginning. Back to the franchising piece, most airport operations are actually licensed. Almost all. It's about 90+%. It is actually one of the licensing opportunities that we would consider because I think it's such a need in the market. And it's something that we will do, hopefully sooner rather than later. It's always just a matter of focus and prioritization. But I think the problem that it solves, and I have the same, we have the same problem is Nick has a series he does about plain salads, and people love that plain salad. It's like the perfect meal to take on the road. So hopefully it's something we can bring to life soon.
I'll be super excited to get there. So your parents were among the first phone calls when you had the concept. Flashing forward now, 17, 18 years. What do your parents think of where you are now?
Our parents are actually all pretty friendly, and they text each other, they hang out sometimes. I think they're so supportive, I think so proud, but also kind of can't believe that we did it in a way. And I think a lot of it is filled with like jokes and humor and just a lot of love than anything else.
I grew up in a hospitality family, generations back, restaurants, hotels. And so when I first told my parents about Sweetgreen, they kind of made a face and said, we've never wanted to encourage you or discourage you from going into the business. They were way more in fine dining and higher end experiences. So they said, go do this. We support you. And either way, it'll make you tougher. And so I think 17 years later, they are surprised and proud that, we've made it this far.
Yeah, I think just really proud. I just remember that the moment of the IPO, having all of our family there, and you're kind of at this momentous occasion. Our parents all came to America with nothing, and to then be at the New York Stock Exchange ringing the bell together, I think it was just brought a lot of pride for them.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you guys taking time.
Thank
Terrific
you
to
for
talk to you,
having
and
us.
excited to see what comes next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.